All right, so welcome to another Camaro restoration episode, and in this episode we are not going to talk about control arms or control arm bushings. And I say that like that in a joking way because the last video where I thought, hey, I'm going to get this whole front assembly done, all the suspension, all the steering parts, the brakes, all that stuff put back on, and make that one video and just go from there. And if you saw the last video, you know that it took a long time, a very frustrating time, and those upper and lower control arm bushings fought me just every step of the way. So that ended up being its own video, and I was certainly, like I said, frustrated with those control arms. So we're not going to talk about those damn things today, other than the fact that we have to install them. I got the upper control arms on. I'm kind of sitting to the side so you can see some of the cool stuff I've put on the car already. And my buddy Matt's on his way over, and we're going to get the lower control arms put on. At the end of the day, they weren't as bad, and they aren't as bad as I made them out to, as I thought they were, I guess, at the end of the other video. So I think they're pretty good. They're a little tight going in. We've got to maybe expand them out a little bit. But like I said, Matt's on his way over, and we're going to get that done. All right, so what we hope to accomplish tonight is to get the lower control arms bolted in, the coil springs, and then the spindles on. And if we can get there tonight, and I can take advantage of having Matt over here, I know that I can finish up the rest. It's just the hubs and the steering linkage, shocks and things like that. So that's where we're headed. Let's see if we can get it done. So before we get into trying to put these lower control arms and those springs and everything, let me show you what I've done. And it's not much, but here's the upper control arm. I think I already showed you guys that ball joint, or at least told you that I had put the ball joints in there. The bump stop, I know I talked about that in the last video. And there it is, and it looks really good, and I feel pretty confident about that. And then obviously here's the other side, same thing, ball joint, new ball joints, and ready to go. All right, so the other thing that I've done, and this is pretty much it, is I've gotten the motor mounts installed, and I used new grade 8 hardware and obviously the new energy suspension motor mounts there. And I'll tell you that these motor mounts are not easy to do. And the reason they're not, let me show you this. Let me show you your access hole down here. So that little groove right there is where you've got to get your hand in to get nuts on the back of those motor mounts. And I can tell you with my hands, it's very difficult to do. I actually got my wife to help me and get her hands, which are obviously smaller than mine, and get her to help me get the bolts on, or the nuts onto the back of those bolts. The other thing I'll tell you about the motor mounts is that space right there where I was putting my hand through, that's where your lower control arm bolts to, right there. And so you've really got to get your motor mounts on before you put on your lower control arms. If you don't, you're going to have to take your control arm back off, I promise you, and because you will not be able to get into that hole with that lower control arm there. So if you're doing a project like this, do your motor mounts first, and then your lower control arms. All right, so that catches everybody up on where I'm at, and as soon as Matt gets here, we're going to start on the lower control arms, the coil springs, and spindles, and see if we can get that knocked out. All right, so Matt finally got here, and what do you think of my... Finally, yeah. What do you think of my upper control arms, bud?
Looks good.
Are they supposed to be that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like that?
Yeah.
Ball joints, did I put those in right? Motor mounts?
Yeah, looks good. All right, so what are we doing here?
So, lower control arms, coil spring spindles.
Okay.
So where do you want to start?
Doesn't matter. Was one closer than the other?
No, unfortunately, both of them are about, I would say, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch off.
All right. And are they too tight? Do you think it deflected, pushing the bearings, the bushings
I think, well, just put one up there and see what you think. I think they're too tight, meaning this way, and they need to be pushed out a little bit, but they're close. And I mean close. It's literally the polyurethane bushing that's stopping them.
Yeah.
I mean, I can hold one end in, and then we can take a pry bar and try to get the other end in.
I still think we should put a bottle jack between there and spread it.
Okay, let's do it.
Because right. I'm pretty sure that deflected at that.
Yeah, no, corner. There's no question that it caved in.
Yeah.
All right, bottle jack time. All right, so when I pressed in the control arm bushings, as you guys know, this thing compressed about, what'd you say, about 1/8 of an inch or so?
Probably a quarter.
Quarter of an inch?
Yeah.
I was, okay, 1/8. I was being, you know, optimistic, man. So anyways, we got a bottle jack in here, and we're going to push this thing back out. But you see how that rubber bushing kind of just pushed out? That actually might give us what we need. We just got to get this one out a little bit, and I don't want to push the metal sleeve out because that thing was a nightmare to get in. So we got to be careful with that, and we're going to do this and see how it works. I think Matt just likes beating up my car.
So if you can see where it's the metal's deflected there, it's kind of got a ridge on it that's holding that bushing. Yep, right there. Yep, that's holding the inner sleeve, the metal inner sleeve, from really lining up to get in that second hole. We got, you know, all the way through the front and the rear part, and the one up front not as bad, but you can see the same thing. So we're going to clean that up a little bit.
How we're going to do that, since you can't fit a grinder in there, is we're going to use the air hammer and see if we can clean it up with this thing. The air hammer didn't work, so now we're cleaning it up with the Dremel tool. And while Matt's doing that, this is the factory bolt on this blue one here, or the, yeah, it's kind of blue, but you see how it's tapered at the top, and it's tapered at the top. Here comes the dogs. Get out of here! They're bolts. They're not bones. Not. Did you hear bolts and thought it said bones? But sorry. But the it's tapered at the top. These are not. That's going to make it a lot easier to get through. And I'm going to go ahead and grind these down and try to make it look like that. I put a nut on them, so in case I mess up the threads, I can back that nut off. Stop it, Casey. So I can back that. I can back the nut off and re-thread it that way. So let me go see if I can make these two look like that one. All right, so there's my handiwork there on the grinder. Much better and pretty close to what it looks like from the factory. And again, that's to facilitate the bolt going through the second hole, helping it, you know, just because it's such a tight fit on the hole and the size of the nut, the size of the bolt, that tapered end will help it get through. So I'm going to get these nuts off, and if I did mess up the threads, that will re-thread it. All right, so after a lot of banging, beating, grinding, we finally got this control arm in both sides, and it just took a lot of pressure to get it get the bolts to go through, but I think it's good. I really do. I think it's really solid. Now on to the driver's side. All right, so control arm number 2 is on, and why are you laughing?
Because you're going to do time lapse, and it's going to make it look like we spent 5 minutes on that one and 5 minutes on this one. When,
what's the reality?
Reality, it's pitch black. Is what, 2 hours later?
Yeah, like
3 hours later.
Yeah, literally like 2. It's yeah, being honest, 2 hours. This one actually went in easier than the first one, but we kind of learned from that one and did some pressing on this, did some expanding on this, and it went in a little bit easier. And I beat the living hell out of that bolt right there to get it in, and I cannot believe we didn't damage the threads, but we didn't. So now that that's done, we're going to try to get these coil springs in and at least get this at least get to that point, coil springs and spindles. All right, so I know it's kind of hard to see, but we got the lower spindle on and castle nut right there. We got to tighten that up a little bit. Then we're going to put our spring here, compress it in, bolt it to there, to the top, and should be good. Now we have to index that spring accordingly, and these are 2-inch lowering springs, so they shouldn't be as bad, I don't think, but we're about to find out. All right, so in the bottom of this lower control arm, there's 2 holes. There's one there and one there. You want to index that spring where it's covering that first hole and just up to the front of that second hole, but not blocking it. And that's the proper index for the spring.
And the index will be referenced to
right there.
the pigtail, the end of the
So
pigtail.
that second hole should be like right there. Right on the edge of it, but not covering it up. There it goes. Oh, I was almost in there. Man, those things have some pressure, don't they?
Yep. Actually, if you start jacking it up, there you go.
There we go. There we go.
All right, how's that looking for the indexing?
As far as the indexing goes,
Look at that. Nailed it.
oh my gosh. Yeah, that's perfect. Covering the first hole, right at the edge of the second hole. All right, we got the driver's side done. Now we're doing the passenger side.
Thank you.
All right, here we go.
Hang on. Okay.
How's our indexing look?
Spot on.
We off?
No, dead on.
Dead on? Okay.
Covering the first hole and exposing the second hole.
Correct. All right, so I did a little bit of off-camera work, as you can see, and I went ahead and got the rest of the front end together. I didn't film it, so just packing bearings, putting the hubs on, buttoning up some things, putting the, torquing everything down. I still haven't put my pitman arm on the steering box, but I did get the steering box in as well. And I've got to kind of align the wheels, the toe of the wheels, the best I can before I set that pitman arm. So that's little stuff left to do. I got to grease all the ball joints and the tie rod ends, and pretty much 99% complete with the front end, which is really big step, really big stage of this restoration complete. All right, so the next step of the process is I'm going to spin the car around literally right where you see it, and instead of the front end sticking out here, it'll be the rear end of the car. I'm going to get it up in the air, and I'm going to tear everything out. So I'm going to tear out the gas tank, the shocks, the leaf springs, the axle, even the perches that the leaf springs go in. And all that stuff's going to be replaced. The axle's going to be rebuilt. Underside of the car is going to be clean and undercoated just like the front half was. So all that's coming up. That's going to be man, it's going to be a lot of work. But it's going to be really cool when that phase is complete and that part of the car is done. After that, I'll move on to the interior and the wiring, and we'll start getting that motor reassembled. It's just sitting right over there, fresh back from the machine shop, kind of a bare block. And we'll get that motor assembled, throw a transmission on it, and man, we'll get this thing on the road. It's going to be a while. It's not going to happen that quickly, but when you get a big step like this done, you feel just a little bit closer to that end goal. So really appreciate you guys, checking out the video, following along for the build. Appreciate all the comments, all the questions, all the, hey, good job, looks great. That kind of stuff really keeps you going, really keeps me going. So really appreciate that. Thanks for your support, and as always, thanks for watching.